Yeah, I would just wanted to say thanks to you guys for allowing me to be a part of the meeting tonight. I had intended for a long time to just come to a TPUG meeting just for fun. But four kids, full-time job in an independent film keep me pretty busy. But yeah, I'm really appreciative of you guys letting me come in and talk about it a little bit. And the film has a big connection to TPUG, being that the preview features the show that you guys run every year, World of Commodore, and someone else who is there who actually appears in the film, which is Leaf. And we yeah, up to this point, we've shot 4 interviews with David Murray, Bo Zimmerman, and then Leaf, and a guy that some of you may know better from the Guru Meditation, Anthony Becker, which is sort of a not sort of it is an Amiga specific kind of channel, but I think Anthony hasn't been a part of that for quite a while, but he actually grew up on the 64, and we got to talking, and we had a great interview with him. So yeah, just sort of dialing back on like how did we get to this point. I won't go through my entire personal history for sure, but I obviously grew up with the 64. I got one when I was 10 years old. Almost ended up with a VIC 20, but that's kind of a funny story. But ended up with a 64, and really really loved it. Of course, like a lot of other people who grew up in that era with them, got into games right away, of course, and some basic programming, and just yeah, my brothers and I really spent a lot of time on it. Really fell in love with it and was just amazed at what it could do uh, for the money. And especially when a few years later, my dad got an IBM PC XT for work. And I remember just hearing about how much he paid for that system. I think it was like 3,000 or 3,500, and just being completely underwhelmed by what that thing could do. It was green screen, monochrome, and a single speaker that could make beeps, and that was about it. And I'm like, man, why would anybody pay this kind of money for this when they could have a Commodore 64? But yeah, I continued to have Commodore as part of my life. I had my bread bin, I think probably up till like got it in 82. I think probably had it till 88, and it blew up. And I took it to this repair shop, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's not repairable," which pretty much anything's repairable, almost. But I think this guy just wanted to keep it for parts, so I sold it to him for like $25, not knowing any better back then. But then maybe not even a year later, picked up Commodore 64C with GEOS and kept that right up until my college days. And then when I went to college, I got involved in film production major, and the studio they had there was running the Amiga 2000 and the video toaster, and that was right in the this would have been like 91 ish, and right in the heyday of when the video toaster was taking off and kind of rocking the world of video production. Kind of the video toaster, as I'm sure many of you know, kind of did for video what some other software did for desktop publishing. Like all of a sudden it was democratized, and you didn't need $100,000 worth of equipment to do some of these amazing things if you had an Amiga with a toaster installed. So yeah, I finished out my degree there, and then at my first job, it turned out that they also had a video toaster, and so spent like 3 or 4 years on that system, um, editing all kinds of videos on it on a tape-based system. Actually, it wasn't even nonlinear editing back then. It was probably like 97, still doing tape-based editing. And even what was cool about that system was typically in a video editing system that's tape-based, you'd have like an independent edit controller. But even that was replaced by the Amiga. It ran this piece of software called AmiLink, and it could control all the decks. And so it was really, I mean, at the time, it was a really impressive, like all-in-one system, and used that for years until finally Premiere and, well, not even Premiere, other nonlinear systems started to come of age and be reasonably affordable. And, the place where I work decided to replace it with that. But, yeah, I always had Commodore in the back of my mind. And fast forward to about 2017, I think we had our second daughter had just been born, and I was, doing all the things that newborn dads do, up late at night, in the middle of the night, sometimes with my daughter, and started poking around on YouTube and saw a video by Dan Wood, who I'm sure many of you know from the Retro Hour. And it was a video he created about, oh, look, the Commodore 64 can get on the internet today, and I was like really shocked by that. I'm like, I can't believe that there's still people developing things for the 64. And that sort of reignited my interest. And I started collecting machines. And I think the thing that shocked me the most was just like the community around the world that was still involved in developing hardware, developing games, just everything that was happening in the 80s. It was like it was still going on in one form or another. BBSs, all that stuff. And that was really a surprise and shock to me. And I think another thing that was great about at least my experience is like the community was so welcoming. Like people really encouraged you to be a part of it and asked, if you had questions, they were eager to answer them. And, the power of the internet, we didn't have that back in the 80s, right? So, I mean, not to the, at least not in the form we have it now, or again, it's democratized. And yeah, I started to think about like, this is such a great community and it's helped me so much. Like, how could I participate in like a meaningful way? And I'm not an assembly language programmer for sure. I think I picked up a book from the library when I was like in 6th or 7th grade because I figured out that people were not writing games in BASIC. There's no way BASIC could do the things that I saw video games doing on the C64. So I kind of figured out they must be doing it another way. And I don't know if it was through magazines or what. I figured out it had something to do with assembly language. Got a book from the library and was just like totally blown over. I'm like, I can't understand this. that kind of ended my coding career. Never really got started, but and I'm definitely not I know enough about electronics to be dangerous. That's about it. Not a hardware developer. And so, but I really wanted to be a part of things. And I don't know when it exactly dawned on me that I was like, well, I've been a filmmaker for 25 years. Maybe that's a way that I can give back to the community and highlight the community. And the more I thought about it, and it was really over a period of about 2.5 years that I started to think about this idea of developing a film about the Commodore 64. I really didn't want it to be just another YouTube video. Sorry. About the history or the major figures, or even a documentary about the history and the major figures, because I think that's out there, that's been done, and that's nothing. It's definitely not a knock against those things. Those things are great, and I'm glad they exist, and I respect all the people who pour time and money and effort into creating them. And there's books, and so I felt like the history and some of the major figures within the company and has kind of all been ground that's tread. So I wanted to really talk about and focus on the joy and surprise that I found, which is the people in the community, and just people's who are still active. They're collectors, or they're preserving some aspect of the 64, whether it's software, magazines, machines, disc images, all kinds of things, documentation. There's people that are doing that. I'm sure I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but yeah, I wanted to sort of highlight and shine a light on what is happening today and the community that surrounds it today, because I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who like grew up with a 64, loved the 64, and yet has no idea that there's such an active scene. You know, I'm wearing this Commodore 64 shirt, and probably like a lot of you guys, I wear it around in public sometimes, and like it so many times when I'm out and about and someone sees the shirt or another one that I have, they're like, "Oh, hey, is that computer from the 80s?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, I had one of those," or my friend had one of those, and we used to play it all the time. And it's like the stories start pouring out of them, and there are so many people with so many great stories to tell about how the C64 impacted their life. Since I started this film and began ramping up towards a fundraising campaign, just so many people have reached out, and a lot of them have shared their stories, and some of them are just incredible. There's a guy from Meta, from Facebook, who's like, "Yeah, I work at Facebook now, but the Commodore 64 is where it all started for me." And I think that that's kind of another dimension that of the film that I hope is a part of it, is sort of helping the general public come to a better understanding of how significant the Commodore 64 was in the history of computers, and still, the number one best-selling home computer in all, single model in all of history. And that's incredible when you think about how old it is now, and it still maintains that record. And I think in some ways, even though there's an active community of people that love the 64 and are still doing things with it, and advancing its capabilities and software, I think in a lot of ways the general public has sort of either never recognized or lost sight of the reality that the Commodore 64 was just a seminal thing in the history of computers. And if you go to most anybody, just a general, not someone who's into retro computing or vintage computing, you go to the average person, and 35 or under, and I think if you were to ask them, well, what was the first really popular home computer, what was the computer that people began having at home, they're going to say an IBM, or they're going to say an Apple II. That's kind of what history remembers. And it's not that there weren't people that didn't have, who had those things. There were, of course, but like before that, there was a Commodore 64 and a lot of other machines, but the Commodore 64 in particular has had a huge impact. And it's been fun and interesting hearing about all the stories about even ways that I didn't know that Commodore impacted those early days. Bo Zimmerman, one of the interviewees in the preview of the film, talks about how there wouldn't even be an Apple, most likely, without Commodore employees helping them get their Apple II up and running, their prototype. So yeah, things really could have been a lot different. But sort of the winners get to write history, right? And so Commodore's been somewhat forgotten in the general population, not for, I don't think, for people who really know and understand the history of vintage computing. But yeah, so those are kind of the dimensions of the film, or the way that we're approaching the film. And I thought it was pretty important up front to not just try to campaign on this idea of like, well, I'd like to do a film and I would like you to get behind it, even though you have no idea who I am or what I've done, or you don't have any idea the quality of this thing. So, my approach to it was, well, I need to do some part of it under my own steam, at my own expense, so that I have something to show people that this is what it's going to be like. This is the style that it will be like. Because I think it is a very different style than other films about retro computers. It's a documentary style. It's kind of just not standard, and it's inspired by some other, one other particular film I saw a number of years ago, where the film, rather than being about a thing, is really about people. And our film is about the 64, but it's also about the people who love it. And that's what it really focuses on, I think, is sort of the human side of it and why people are so dedicated to this platform and what it means to them. So, yeah, over the course of a couple years, we were able to get these first 4 interviews shot and develop that into a 10-minute preview. And have been working along up until this past August to launch a fundraising campaign, which was a tremendous amount of work. I don't know if anyone else is in the room or online has ever done a fundraising campaign in Kickstarter or something else. But it is an amazing amount of work. I would say it was it was as much work to do that as it was to shoot and edit the film. Very close anyway. And so we put the film out there, we put the preview out there last May, and I thought to myself, well, if we get 5,000 views inside of a month, that'll be encouraging, probably keep going with this effort if we reach that goal. And pretty quickly, within just a few days, we reached 5,000 and then 10 and then 20. And in the first month, it reached nearly 70,000 views. And I was really shocked. And I have to say thank you to TPUG, who, there was one individual in TPUG in particular who really worked hard to get the word out there on all the C64 related sites and Reddit and all these spaces. I mean, I was working at it too, but he had some particular connections that I didn't have. So I think I want to say thank you for that, and thank you for just the way that TPUG has already been supportive of the film, especially especially and including Leaf, agreeing to be interviewed when he didn't know me from anyone. He was somebody. I was talking to another figure within the community who I probably won't mention because he declined to be interviewed, which is fine. You always get some no's, but I said, oh, that's okay, but is there anyone else you feel like would be a good interview or someone I should definitely focus on? And he immediately mentioned Leaf. So I was very thankful that Leaf and all 3 of the other interviewees said yes to being interviewed and sitting down with us and showing us some of their collection and talking to us about why this 64 is such a special platform and meaningful to them. And so I really, and even up to and including David Murray, like when I decided to try and reach out to him, I thought 90% chance this is going to be a no. He's not going to agree to appear. I mean, I gotta believe he is so busy. I don't know when he sleeps because he's just got so much stuff going on, projects going on all the time. But I reached out to him, and nearly immediately, like I think within 2 hours, he was like, yeah, if you're trying to develop something about the 64, I'm really interested in supporting an effort like that. And I was shocked. So, myself and the associate producer, Dan, flew out to Dallas, and we interviewed Bo in that trip, and then David as well. And he was really gracious and gave us a lot of time. And same with Anthony, same with Leaf. So been really happy and gratified with what we've been able to capture up to this point. But it did get to a point where I financially kind of reached what I could do with it. So that was why we were always heading towards a campaign. So we launched the campaign this past in August, and it's running for 30 days through October 5th. And we started off like a lot of campaigns, sort of with a bang, and gained a lot of ground in the first week. And it slowed down definitely week 2, and now we're in week 3. And according to the metrics of the platform we're using, which I could talk more about if anyone's interested, we're not using Kickstarter, and there were some some reasons we chose to use this other platform called Seed and Spark. And up to this point, I feel like that has been a good decision. But according to the metrics, our campaign's performing right about average. We started out above average, and now we've kind of settled in at average. So yeah, we got about 2 weeks left worth. And our goal is 25,000, which is pretty conservative for when you stop and think about what we're trying to do. It's a very tight budget. I guess is what else I'm trying to use the funds as efficiently as I possibly can, but the thing that makes it very expensive is the travel. And the personalities that we want to interview are spread all throughout the United States, North America, and Canada. And so that just makes it an expensive proposition sort of from square one. And then there is also the reality that there are many people who would like us to shoot figures overseas. And you can imagine that becomes expensive very quickly. And, I've had some people ask me, well, why don't you just, do Zoom calls or streaming or Skype with people and record that. And I think that's fine for some forms of video, like obviously we're doing it right now. But for a documentary film, one of the things that we sort of committed to right out of the gate was, no, we want to shoot people in person with, high quality 4K or better equipment, and be able to be there and capture, additional B-roll footage and really tell their story. So it's not any knock on people who conduct who do their videos in that way and capture interviews over streaming calls and stuff. But we decided right out of the gate that we weren't going to approach things that way. But that also made the expense of the film higher. And definitely there is a there is a good amount of pressure for us to travel overseas and interview major figures overseas. And undoubtedly, they are out there. Arguably the Commodore 64 is more popular in Europe than it was in the United States. So, and there's, a huge community and scene, on that side of the world, and demo parties and all kinds of things. So, we would love to do whatever we can to make that happen, but everything, of course, is dependent on funding and time. Every film out there wants to have more funding and more time, but rather than make the scope of the film so huge that it would never be accomplishable, either from a monetary standpoint or from a time standpoint in just finishing it, we wanted to scale the project properly in a way that would make sense and not sort of doom it to failure from the start. So yeah, like I said, we're in our third week of the campaign, and the platform we're using, I was going to talk a little bit about that. It's called seedandspark.com, and they are a crowdfunding platform, but they are specifically geared towards independent films. And I think one of the things that attracted me right off was that they have an 82% success rate, which is really shocking because I think Kickstarter is down around 30. And, after a lot of analysis and talking with people and researching things, we felt like Seed and Spark was a better platform for this project than Kickstarter. We kind of felt like Kickstarter is a big ocean and we're going to get lost in there, and it's not specifically for films. The smaller platform is directed at independent films. And another thing that was really great about it was it's not like you just, create an account on the site and away you go. They actually work with you and help you develop your campaign. There's certain metrics you have to meet before they will allow you to launch. So you can't just show up on the site and be like, well, I want to create a film. I haven't done any of the groundwork to gather followers or tell anybody about the film, or, the film basically has 0% chance of succeeding, but hey, I want to put up a campaign. They actually won't allow you to do it. You can do that on Kickstarter or a lot of other platforms. but you can't do that on Seed and Spark. So it was a guided process, and I appreciated that about it, because obviously I've never done it. I've shot a lot of films in my career, but never with a crowdfunding model. So I definitely appreciated the guidance. And then the other thing that I really liked about it was that it wasn't an all or nothing proposition like Kickstarter. With Kickstarter, if you're not 100% funded on your last day at the last moment, then it's zero for you. And Seed and Spark maintains a model that if you reach 80% of the goal, then you get funded. 80%. So that was attractive as well. And so yeah, we sort of made the decision to cast our lot with Seed and Spark. And like I said, up to this point, I think it's been a really good decision. And so yeah, we are working hard towards that goal. And if successful, then we hope to go on. And well, we don't hope to. We are planning on going and shooting more interviewees, gathering more footage, talking with more people. And yeah, I'm really excited about the possibilities. And yeah, kind of our schedule is, if we're funded successfully, then from October 2023 to 2024, we'll mostly be shooting and in production. And then October 2024 to probably end of first quarter 2025 will be post-production and then the release. So yeah, I would encourage anybody who's interested and wants to check it out to go to well, over there, mirrored. Over there. Over there. I'll get it right yet. Over my shoulder. My hand keeps disappearing. You can go to iadoremy64film.com and check it out. I can give you our funding campaign link, but it's also on the website, and it's probably just easier to go on the website, and it's like the first thing on the website, and you can click it and go there and check it out. But also on our website, there's sort of, for those that might be interested, there's sort of a blog, of the process that we've been through to get to this point. And it has been a long process, and there's been a rough road, and there's a couple times that I just thought this was going to come to an end. And but we've survived, and we've made it this far. And so yeah, kind of the whole story of the film is on there. And then also I should mention that we've had a couple of incentives. Before the campaign really took off, we gave away a free vintage Commodore 64 original that I had restored. And then in our another incentive we had at the very beginning was for everybody who donated $50 or above, they got a chance to win a C64 direct to TV for the first getting now if it's 50 or 100 bids of $50. But and then I don't know if any of you are familiar with Daryl Westbury of the Evo 64 project. That's the modern day recreation of the Commodore 64 with a lot of modern day enhancements, and it's a really cool product. And you can't even get this board that we're selling the way it is, I don't think, without getting a builder involved. But this board, it normally comes in a DIY kit, but this board has sockets on board and some other things already on board. How long have I been muted?
Yeah, just 5 seconds.
Just now.
Oh, good. All right. The board we're selling is actually a prototype board that was created just before the release of the boards that they're selling. So it's feature complete and everything. And yeah, we were really floored by the Daryl and Evo 64's generosity. So we're auctioning that off on eBay right now, and let's take a look and see where it's at. Hmm. Sorry, one sec. Yeah, currently sitting at $400, so less than retail right now. So you got a good chance to perhaps get a discount on it. So yeah, we have that running as well. And yeah, we're really excited about where it might go. And yeah, hope to be funded here in the beginning of October. Yeah. If anyone has any questions about the film, you can if you want to see the preview, you can go to our website, and by clicking on that, you can see like our pitch video and the 10-minute preview, as I said, and some other clips, one from Leaf, another one from Bo, and some other content we have on there. But yeah, if you want to check it out and see what the film is actually going to be like, you can do that there. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
So one question I have is, I had no idea about Commodore people helping with Apple. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
6502.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Lost again. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think there's a story about Commodore printing stuff, creating EEPROMs for Atari or something as well.
That could be. The story that I'm referring to, I'm pretty sure is in Brian Bagnall's book. He talks about it too. But basically, when Jobs and Wozniak were trying to develop the Apple One, and they were using the 6502 processor, they actually couldn't get it working. And Chuck Peddle, of Commodore, actually was invited over there, and he actually assisted them in getting it corrected and getting it up and running. And so the story goes that during that conversation, Steve Jobs suddenly said, "Hey, we're starting a computer company. We're gonna sell this computer. We're gonna be worth a lot of money. You might want to buy us. Like we would sell you the company right now for $2 million." And Wozniak talking about how embarrassed he was by that. But yeah, at one point, Jobs had made an offer to Commodore early on to buy them out. So, that's just crazy. Who knows where things would have gone if that had happened. But so far as I know, in the research I've done and things I've read, that is not an apocryphal story. So it's interesting that, without Commodore engineers helping them, who knows if there even would have been an Apple II or an Apple One or an Apple computer at all. So yeah.
That's cool.
I have a question. Why did Commodore go under, but Apple made it $1 trillion company?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'm no authority on it, to be totally honest. But my opinion from all that I've seen and read and heard, from people within the company, who were there to experience this, it's, Commodore made a lot of poor business decisions that ultimately sunk them. And, it's more complicated than that, I think. But on a 50,000 foot level, I think that they took some missteps and misread the market. And ultimately, yeah, they did not survive in the long haul. I think, it was really interesting in the Amiga days. I think everybody was pulling for them, and the Amiga really in a lot of ways was just an incredible machine that was way ahead of its time. But it's not always the best product that wins. That's the reality of business, right? If that was the case, the best product always won, then we all would have been using Betamax players or not VHS players, right? Because technically, VHS is the inferior product on a technical level, but they had better marketing and they won out. And I think Commodore was also the victim of some of that with the Amiga. That's my personal take on it, although I bet every person you talk to might have a different perspective, and there are certainly people that are more better educated than me on those subjects that could answer those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So it looks like you're up to about $5,000 or so out of
Yeah.
the 5,000. Is there a plan if you happen to not get that goal? What is your plan? If you-
Try. No, no, there is a plan. You know, you have to enter into it understanding that that could happen. You just don't know, you know. And you know, I think we've continued to reflect on like, well, what can we do if we don't succeed in this campaign? I think there's a couple possibilities. Like, we always have the opportunity to try again. You know, of course, we could sort of reorient or even restructure what we plan to do and take a different approach. I think I've already learned some things along the way in this campaign, one of which is people still really want Blu-rays. Because in the beginning I just didn't even think that would be a necessary incentive, but a lot of people reached out saying that they really would like to have that, so we ended up adding that back in after the campaign launched. But if we do not make our goal not even 80%, then you know, I'm going to step back and look at like, what can we do with what we already have, you know, because what's in the preview, what's in the 10-minute preview is it's a fraction of what we shot and captured. So there remains the possibility that we could develop that more fully and then try again. Or, you know, we could even look at maybe, you know, something I thought about is like maybe like a Patreon model where it's like, okay, we release these 4 episodes, we try to build a Patreon following, and then we continue to build more segments as we get the funding to do that. So I think really the sky's the limit, although I would prefer to get funded, especially after all this effort. But, you know, we'll see what happens.
So do you have any preview as to besides in that 10 minutes, do you have any hints as to other people that would be interviewed in that, or do you want to keep that a secret so that it's not spoiled?
I would say I don't want to keep it a secret, but out of respect for some people who have already said yes and some people who have said no. And like, yeah, I think it's probably best that I keep it under wraps. But what I will say is it's all people that you would recognize if you have any sort of activity in the Commodore community. It's people you would know right off. And so, yeah, it's well-known people, and we've had some commit to saying, yes, if you get funded, I agree to be interviewed, and others who were still in, you know, mid-level conversations about it. But I don't think finding interviewees will be the problem. The problem will be picking what we can do with the money we have. Like, who can we actually interview? What can we actually do with the resources that we have? Like I was saying before, I've received an awful lot of, not pressure, but focused interest. We'll say that focused interest on, well, the scene in Europe. And it's like, I have to acknowledge the fact that why should people from Europe, you know, and other parts of the world support a film that's not featuring the scene in their part of the world? So, you know, I don't want to overcommit and say, oh yeah, we're going to do that, and then not have the funding to do it. So what I've told people is we're going to do as much as we can with the funding that we receive, and we're going to try to be really good stewards of it. And that's part of the reason why I didn't put out a lot of physical incentives, because unfortunately the reality of that is if you do that, there's a lot of time, money, and effort spent in fulfilling those incentives, and that takes away from being able to use that money to more fully develop the film. So I tried to, and honestly, at the advice of the platform we're using, Seed and Spark, I tried to focus on digital incentives and things that we could deliver digitally and for free. but yeah, I'm getting off track. But yes, I mean, obviously I would say the people that we've already interviewed are people that everybody knows. Everybody knows David Murray. I mean, everybody knows Bo. A lot of people know Anthony, and everybody knows TPUG, and they might not know Leaf specifically, but many people after they saw the preview were like, oh, I was a part of TPUG back in the day, or I used to be involved with this other club. So yeah, it's not like obscure people that you've never heard of before. I guess is the best way to answer that. Yeah, anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes, I don't know where you are, but
Oh, I don't have my video on. Sorry.
okay, that's all right.
Let me try this. So
Hey.
hi. Loved your presentation
Oh, thank you.
there. Now I don't know what kind of questions you're looking for, but my question is kind of like, it's more like a brainstorming thing. Like, have you considered partnering with someone in Europe to save yourself some cost, where someone over there could help you conduct the interviews or something, or even in the States or wherever you can't get to?
Yeah, it has been a consideration, but I don't know that there would really be a huge or any cost savings in me like turning it over to an external crew, because I have spent my career being a filmmaker, producer, shooter, editor. It's like I pretty much can can do the whole process, and I'm the cheapest person because I don't have to pay myself. So, would there be some circumstances where like, oh, we could hire a crew in Germany or the UK and they could shoot it for us, and we could rely on that, and that might be less expensive than me and perhaps one other person going ourselves? It's possible, but I would say it's not likely. And then we're sort of relying on them to understand our vision and capture things the way we want them to and run the interviews the way we want them to. And it's pretty difficult. I've had some of those experiences before in my professional career where, okay, we can't, and I worked for a global nonprofit for about 12 years and did have some situations where it's like, well, we don't have funding to go there, but there's a crew over there, we'll have them do it. And sometimes, despite your best attempts to communicate what it is you're hoping to do and what it is you need to capture, what comes back is not what you hoped for or off track. So that's a little bit of a concern to me. There is like, when you drop that money and you give it to another crew or group of people to do it for you, there are some inherently problematic issues with it. Not to say that it can never be successful. I think that it can, but there's some inherent risks, I guess is what I should say. But yes, to answer your question, yes, it's something we've considered.
Thanks.
Yeah. Last call. Anybody else? All right.
So I have a question. So
Oh yeah, sure.
so where else have you promoted your film? How have you promoted, and where, like big vintage computer places have you promoted?
Yeah, so mostly what I've focused on and what we focused on are some of the big Facebook groups. Like there's some, massive Facebook groups, I'm sure you're aware. And we've spent a couple of years, or I've spent a couple of years trying to have a presence there, trying to be involved in the community and, not just dropping in one day and say, hey, guess what? Nobody knows me and I'm going to produce this film. So there was kind of a run up to the campaign in that way. And then, like I was saying, there's a gentleman within the TPUG group who really had a lot of connections in places I didn't, in some of these online websites like Lim64 and Reddit groups and things like that. And he's definitely been promoting it in there. And then, of course, we have our own Instagram account and Twitter, X, and things like that. And then we've also recently done a fair number of streaming and streaming shows or podcasts. So one of the things that I felt really fortunate about was not this past Friday, but the Friday before, we actually I was actually interviewed on the Retro Hour podcast, which is, probably the biggest retro computing podcasts in the world, I think it's fair to say. So that was great publicity, and I really appreciated them doing that and being able taking. And it was funny because at first when the host of the show, Dan Wood, who actually is the guy who kicked this all off for me, which is crazy, it's kind of come full circle. I thought that he just wanted to have me on like as a 2 or 3 minute deal, during their news segment. But when we got into it, I realized, oh wait, like I'm the main guest. I was shocked. So, but that was really great. And then just this past, Saturday, we appeared virtually at the World of Retro Computing Expo 2023. And there were some other bigger name guests there, like Bil Herd and Jerry Ellsworth and stuff like that. So, that was good publicity. And this past Monday, we had an interview with Scene World Podcast, who are, from what I understand anyway, for what I can tell, are pretty well known within the Commodore community, especially overseas. And then on this coming Saturday, we're also doing another live streaming appearance with a big Commodore group in Europe. So we're trying to push all the buttons, but I'm sure there's things that we've missed and things we could have done that maybe escaped us. Yeah.
Question. Have you heard any news about the C256 Phoenix?
Yes. Stephanie Allaire, you're talking about? It was a little tough to hear you.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, only, I mean, I've watched some of the videos of Stephanie talking about it and seen Yan Beta's video about it. But my understanding is, my limited understanding of it, it seemed like it started out as maybe being sort of a C64, not clone, but I guess compatible type of system. But over time, it drifted away from that. But still really interesting piece of hardware, and have a lot of respect for Stephanie and everyone who's been involved in that project. It's pretty amazing. But I don't think, because it's a little bit too far afield from the 64 itself, that'll be something we really focus on in the film.
You're just talking about in general.
Sorry.
You're just talking about in general.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's probably people on this call who know more about it than I do.
I know more because she had been at VCF East a few times, and I watched all her videos. So
yeah. Yeah, I would really like to get my hands on the Mega 65. There you guys have one tonight, which is awesome. There was one interview, I was Anthony Becker, and he thought he might have one before we interviewed him. But like a lot of people, I think he's still waiting on his. So I don't know what Leaf did, but
Second batch. I wasn't even in on the first batch.
but I know there's a lot of people waiting for them, and it's really cool. We have seen two original Commodore 65s. Bo had one, and Anthony has one. And in the video, in the preview, he talks about how he got that for $40. So that's just crazy. But yeah, so we've seen two originals, but no Mega 65s yet. But it's a really cool project, and I've sort of been following it tangentially, of course.
Oh, I can just make one comment. Why do people want Blu-rays? Is probably because they want to own it, because nowadays there's lots of different issues about owning things, and everything being digital is very convenient. You can search for everything.
Yeah.
And you don't have to store 10,000 DVDs, but people like to own things and
Yeah.
own it and have it forever and not have to rent it and then it goes away because the service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why.
And a lot
Yeah.
of us older people realize that as soon as you go to try to watch something, you get this video is unavailable, and you're out, right?
Like,
So
yeah.
it's no
Yeah.
good. We need physical media still.
No, I agree. And I thought maybe like that, honestly, that's how I feel about it. And yet I thought, oh, that's not how people feel nowadays. And they probably just rather have a file, an SD file. And that's how I kind of did it. Like at a certain tier, you get an SD file, at a certain tier, you get an HD file. And then, at a higher tier, you get the full whammo, you get a 4K file. And like I was like, well, it's it's not a physical disc, but if people have the file, then they're probably happy with that. And I was wrong. And yeah, that's totally fine. The biggest deal with Blu-rays is actually not creating it, because I've actually, in my professional career, I've done it. I used to have to do DVD authoring all the time, and then later on did Blu-ray authoring. So the authoring is actually not the problem. That's usually the part that people have to outsource and stuff. It's just the replication fees, because you're going to get charged to run 1,000, whether you run one or you run 1,000.
Yeah, and then
You're
you
kind of
gotta
like
do
in for a
covers.
penny. Yeah. Yeah. And covers and albums and and
It's a
all
big
that
cost.
stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you letting me talk, and I'll turn it back over.
One question for you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Have you thought about doing a comparison, video or film, between the Commodore 64 and the Apple II GS?
Well, I don't want to get beat up. Well, why don't you expand on that thought? Why would you want to see those two compared?
Well, because the Apple II GS has superior sound, but I don't know about its graphics.
Mm-hmm.
Good graphics and sound, so
Mm-hmm.
the way I thought it'd be a good comparison with the.
Yeah. What year did the Apple II GS come out? Does anybody know?
Yeah, something like that. It was designed to compete with the Amiga and the Atari. Yeah, Atari.
Says 1986 according to Google.
86?
Yeah, I would have guessed 85, but okay, 86.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's another amazing thing about the 64 was, it remained relatively unchanged for its entire, 10-ish year run, and still kept selling. It's pretty crazy. I think it's a testament to how much capability it did have right out of the gate, although of course it was outclassed later by later models. So yeah, I think there's a lot of comparisons you could do like that would be interesting. I think if you really wanted to stir the pot, you could do Commodore 64 versus the Spectrum, and really upset a lot of people.
Yeah,
Especially people in the UK.
debate about that. I haven't read the full thing, but heard about it.
Yeah. While I was promoting the film, on some of these Facebook groups, every once in a while, and maybe some of you saw this, I create these little ads that are just, they're meant to be funny and tongue in cheek, or to look like ads from back in the day or whatever. And this one ad I created, it was a picture from back in the 80s. Someone overseas had given me permission to use their photo, and in big bold letters in the Commodore advertising logo font, I put still boots faster than the Commodore 64 still boots faster than a PS5. And man, that got some people mad. Obviously it was supposed to be a joke and sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but yeah, there were some people that were not happy that I was putting down the PlayStation 5. Probably the people who went out and spent all the money on it. But yeah, it's funny. It's funny what capabilities and features are important from one era to the next. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it. I'll hand it back over.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.